Let's discuss resume length. So, you know when it's appropriate to prepare a one-page versus a two-page document for a given client. So, how do you decide whether to use a one-page or two-page resume? Let's start with the two-pager, only because the majority of clients that you'll be working with tend to be executives with a lot of experience. And for the majority of cases, a two-page document will be appropriate, and that's what you'll end up preparing. So two-page documents work very well for candidates with over 7 to 10 years or so of experience. Very rarely do we go on to a third page. We even had a client who was a CFO of a Fortune 500 company, and even for him, we did a two-page document because what you'll end up doing is condensing some of the experiences that the client had early on in their career. So in his case, for example, when he started out as an analyst in financial planning and analysis, then moved on to become a senior analyst within the real estate finance function, all of those things, yes, it's nice to outline their career trajectory so you can show exactly how the person grew throughout their career. But when they're a CFO, all of those things from early on, they're just not going to add much value, and recruiters aren't going to be very interested in them. So, what you can do is put them into early career section, which we'll discuss in more detail later on. But it can often be perfectly fine just to list the position titles, dates, company names, and so forth without going into any additional detail. Um, and you may even consider just leaving off positions from early on in a candidate's career altogether. So if someone held admin roles or internships, those types of things, they're just not going to be super relevant. So long story short, you should be able to condense for 90% of the clients you work with their entire career history into a two-page document. But if you ever think you really need a third page, just let us know and we can work with that on a case-by-case basis. So then one-page documents, those will be appropriate for candidates with up to 7 to 10 years of experience, as well as obviously students or recent graduates. However, you may also consider using a one-page document for an experienced candidate with a super straightforward and linear career path. So let's say someone started out as an accounting analyst, progressed to senior accounting analyst, then became an accounting manager, and then eventually, a director of maybe financial planning and analysis. If they had several roles where they're progressing, but really a lot of the day-to-day remains the same, aside from the fact that they're managing teams and taking on more strategic responsibilities, sometimes you might find that you would be repeating a lot of information within bullet points and paragraph overviews. And in that case, it might make sense to just condense it all down into one very clean, concise one-page resume. So that can work very well as well. So how do we structure one and two-page resumes? Let's start with a classic two-pager. So at the top, we'll have a career highlights section, which is essentially a professional summary where we'll outline the client's niche areas of expertise as well as their career trajectory and key accomplishments from throughout their career. And we'll dive into each of these sections in a lot more detail later on throughout the training, but I just want to sort of compare and contrast how a two-pager would differ from a one-pager. So we have career highlights, key expertise up top, with the idea that when a recruiter picks up the document, right away they'll be able to see whether the client fits the box of what they're looking for. Then we'll jump into the professional experience section. In the professional experience section, usually what we'll do is outline a client's day-to-day responsibilities and the scope of their role within a little paragraph overview section. That paragraph overview will be followed up by the standard bullet points where we're focusing more on achievements and the impact they made in the given role as opposed to the day-to-day. And then after professional experience, you may consider including an early career section. So as I said earlier, if someone's positions just aren't super relevant given where they are in their careers today, you may just list out that career trajectory there. Board memberships, if applicable, any certifications or qualifications the candidate had, and then education. So we'll put that list out, all of the degrees. And lastly, relevant skills. So if they're using any specific software tools in their role, so any technical skills as opposed to soft skills such as leadership and communication. Um, and then on a one-page resume, so same list over here, but I just crossed out the elements that we would not include. So we're not going to include a career highlight section or a key expertise section, primarily because when you have a one-page document, the recruiter will pretty quickly be able to skim it and pick up the main points. But also we just have less real estate to work with, so to speak. So we want to make sure that all of the information we have is adding value. And when you only have a page, we really need to focus that on the professional experience section. Now, the professional experience section will differ slightly from a two-page document in the sense that we're not going to have paragraph overviews. We're just going to jump straight into the bullet points. You also won't have a early career section or a board membership section because likely with the one-page document, the candidate is already early on in their careers. If they do have any certifications, definitely put those on there. And then education. So education on a one-page resume, if someone is experienced, yes, it'll come at the bottom. But if they are a current student or a recent graduate, then usually we'll put that education section on top above professional experience. And then lastly, any relevant skills at the bottom. So again, technology, hard skills, software programs, languages, those are things that you would consider listing. So hopefully that gives you a framework to think about how you would decide whether to use a two-page document or a one-page document. And then each of the sections that we discussed here will go into in a bit more detail so you understand exactly what we would typically incorporate and how we structure those areas.